Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning, even if it is a little remote from Lake Jackson.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. I'm here in the Northern Virginia area today.
Yes, and I heard, it's a secret, but since you went up with me, everybody knew you were up there in Washington because you did not want to miss that wonderful convention. So what did you learn from all this convention stuff? You know, this is pretty important stuff, and I'm not making fun because I was there as a speaker, and I was trying to emphasize the part that I thought was very important.
Yeah, I'm still recovering. I don't know how you feel, but it was a whirlwind trip. But I tell you what, Dr. Paul, the excitement in the room when you got up to speak was amazing. Everyone that I've talked to said your speech was great. It was just, I felt very heartened to see so many, over 1,000, I think, people who were so excited to hear the message of liberty. So I came away feeling great. I don't know how you felt, Dr. Paul.
Well, ambivalent because, I try to prepare. I don't want to read anything. That can get pretty boring. It allows for some flaws, and so I'm cautious, and I listen to the crowd, and I do get energy from a crowd that's so positive. And one thing is when the crowd is with one that is doing the speaking, they seem to be willing to overlook flaws. And when I look at bits and pieces, I don't like to watch it afterwards. But even on this one, when I did, I see the flaws quickly. I say, I could have done better. I could have done better. But I think overall the reception was good. And you did mention, the reception audience when I started, and it reminded me of the campaigns, that we had during the presidential races. And so when I walked in, it was the shouting and the Fed, and I made the point that that was what was going on. It came from the crowds. Even the slogan came from the crowds. And it started on a liberal university campus, and ending the Fed became something very important. And ironically, it was the closing cheer at the end. And I think it means more to me now because it was a big issue. But when I decided to run for Congress a long time ago, I did on the idea that the economy is in shambles. That was in the 70s and all the mess we had, inflation, and it was a big deal. The gold standard was thrown out the window. I believed it was ushering in a big age. But as I spent time in Washington and working with the total philosophy of liberty, I realized the engine of the whole enemy of liberty comes from the Federal Reserve. They can't finance all their special interests, all the welfareism, all the militarism, all the attacks on our private our property and our liberties. So it is a big deal. So even though some people, the people who aren't really with us or are against us because they see us as the enemy, that we close down their system of being able to get the wealth from the people's pockets by just printing more money. So they're not ever going to be with us. But most people, I think, have changed a lot. And from that event that we had there, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm. It was a big crowd, and if you look at only at the television and elsewhere, you wouldn't think nobody exists out there. They care, and I come back, with the belief that yes, it's still there. And that was what the theme of my talk was: encourage people to get at it, and instead of saying, well, and moan and groan about what's happening and the bad things that are happening, I said the empire is ending. There's opportunity. Who's going to fill the void? Some people do this on purpose to further attack liberty, but it's actually an opportunity to fill the void. When the empire is gone and there's a calamity and we're in bankrupt and we have to restart, this gives an opportunity for those of us who sincerely believe in liberty.
Yeah, and everyone was gathered there because they're running a political campaign. They're running a presidential campaign. And some people I've heard are disappointed with who they chose. But I think you're right, Dr. Paul. It really doesn't matter in the long run because the people who were there for liberty, I think elections are secondary. And that's why, at the Ron Paul Institute for the last 10 years, we focused on that. We focused on education. So, I mean, I found it was a great count. I only kind of regret the fact that we did have to kind of rush out of there. It would have been nice to talk to some people. There were some great people who just wanted to visit, but unfortunately, you know how it is, Dr. Paul. It's a long way down to Texas, and you had to take off.
You know, I purposely try to stay away from the personality things, and I didn't get into it, but I did name one function that is identified with some personalities. But I think the crowd sort of understood exactly where I was, and that has to do with technology. And I'm talking about that in a broad sense, not just AI and internet and all this. And my position wasn't complicated. Technology is great. Just think of the wonders that have been going on. At the same time, you know, how much advancement have we had with the bringing about peace in the world? And I made the point that the big deal is when the technology comes in, everybody will want control. And a lot of people participate, but who's in charge at the end? And of course, my big fear is the government's going to be in charge of it. I mean, if they could be in charge of the money and the gold system and the entire economy and tell us what the interest rates have to be, you know, and what the inflation rate will be 2% next year, that sort of thing. Technology will be used, and it will be, even though it's people argue what the status is, and it is complex. But the one thing is, governments will always want control of it, and use of technology to further spy on us and control us, and that's why. And that was one statement I made that I thought there was a lot of support for that. It wasn't because I didn't attack one thing here and set up the other thing that I knew the answer to all the problems. But the biggest problem I saw was, of course, technology is great and wonderful. It should be developed. Hopefully it will be in more of the world of voluntarism, and that, watch out, the government will be after control of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first kind of topical thing we wanted to talk about today was something we both noticed in Zero Hedge this morning, and it's been in the news for a few days. But that's the new plans for conscription across Europe. You know, Rishi Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, announced a few days ago that he wants to bring back the draft. He wants to bring back compulsory national service. And there was a piece on Zero Hedge again that talks about several other countries in Europe are thinking about bringing back the draft, bringing back compulsive service. And to be honest, Dr. Paul, it feels like we're back in the 1980s and 1970s in the middle of the Cold War.
You know, that reminds me of one other item and point that I made on Sunday, and that was the fact that I brought this issue up, the draft. And I was talking about slavery, and I said, there's two things you have to worry about if you're worried about the government enslaving us. And of course, the one I said is the income tax, because the income tax is based on the assumption that everything you earn belongs to the government, and they allow you to keep and spend what they decide you can spend, and therefore it's not yours. So you work and you're enslaved in that. And the taxation, which is rent on our properties, is a big item. But also it is also the draft. I mean, that is involuntary servitude. Millions and millions of people die on it. When you add up the people that we send off to war, as well as the innocent people that die because of us joining international organizations and aggravating these wars, the worse the problems get. So those are the examples of the draft, and that is one of the reasons from the very beginning, because I was in a legislative fight. The draft was eliminated after Vietnam in the early 70s. But registration came back later on because they didn't have registration. Nothing happened, and I think registration is a farce. They have us registered already, but no, you had to register and they go through this process. And I think that means that they want to remind us, those people who are in charge, that if we lose control, which we usually do, that we are the people who are the authoritarians, that we might need you, or we'll want you, or we'll take you. So I see taxation and the military draft, even if they have a draft for social services. Oh no, we don't want you to go to war. We want you to just go and do social services, and we want to help people and teach you how to be gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, of course. So that is a big deal. And if you narrow it down to that, you say, boy, that is true. We only have to deal with two things: taxation and military draft. And we can be drafted without them putting a uniform on us, because they draft us through the money. They take the money, and we end up fighting the wars, and we don't decide to, we're too complacent. People are too complacent. Look how long we've been in Afghanistan and many other places. And now we're continuing that. But it's always another enemy, and so we have to be very vigilant on how the government handles our enslavement.
Yeah, I wonder how it's going to go over in Europe. It's strange because Rishi Sunak is extraordinarily unpopular in the UK. His numbers are they make Biden's look good, right? And so he made a surprise announcement of snap elections coming up on July 4th. And it's interesting because he's been quoted as saying, I don't want to be a wartime president. He knows he's going to lose, and so he's calling elections. It almost seems to me like he's calling for the draft because he wants to ensure that he loses. He doesn't want to be in charge, But I can't believe that among the youth of the United Kingdom and elsewhere in Europe now, that young people are going to be saying, "Wow, this is great. I get to waste a year of my life doing something for the state instead of pursuing my degree, starting my career, starting my family, or what have you. I got to give up a year for the state."
They use these social terms that the reason we want to control hiring and firing is they have these noble goals under DEI, especially the diversity. We need diversity. And the people claim, well, this is why we have to get all peoples coming from all over the world, and not by voluntarism and voluntary to participate, but it has to be to make it fair. Can you imagine that? Making it fair and avoid the Constitution and take people and drag them out. And this goes on and on. And when you just think of my short lifetime, because I remember very well World War II and all the times that we've been fighting this. And here we are expanding again. So yes, the British are doing it. Europe's doing it. We're doing it. And all of a sudden, if you go to 2010 or so, there were problems, but the talk wasn't like what happened after 2014. And they really had the machine. They had that Ukraine thing there, and they have been using that as a tool for spending money and also setting people up for the draft. And all of Europe is going along with that, but we go along with it too. And a matter of fact, they resent us because our government gets involved. We are the kingmakers, and we have a little bit of safety by our geographic location, but when it comes to morality and honesty, we should bear up to how much responsibility we have for the conditions of the world today and the participation in modern day slavery.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ukraine. I think that's the backdrop to this whole thing. Their Project Ukraine, their idea that they're going to take down Russia through Ukraine is failing, and that's obvious to everyone. And as it fails, they're looking at a general war with Russia, which is, I lived through a lot of the Cold War, so did you, Dr. Paul. The idea, even when we had an ideological enemy in the Soviet Union and expansive Soviet communism, we don't even have an ideological enemy. Nobody understands why we're going to this war footing. But I just wonder now if young people are going to start to wake up throughout Europe. Maybe we'll start to see some draft protests, draft riots, who knows? But, like you say, they're going to sweeten it by saying, well, we're not going to put a uniform on you. You're going to go help in an old age home or something like this. They're going to sweeten it, but they better believe it. Once they've got your name and they know where you are, as soon as the war breaks out, you're going to give you a rifle and a couple of boots.
It seems to us, when we think about this and the advantages, and compare voluntarism and the results of a system like that, compared to authoritarianism, where a few people take over and they know what's best for the rest of us. And the difference is just horrendous. There's so many advantages, to have voluntarism. People come together only when both sides agree to come together. So that to me is hard to believe. And the other thing is when you look about it, what are the net results? If you want to look at the net results of prosperity and peace, the more voluntary it is. There's places around the world, I think about the Middle East, when there was less government authoritarianism and designs by outsiders, and voluntarism, people learn to get along together a lot better than they are when you have the internationalists come in who are making money off these wars. That is a big, big difference. So I think it's a darn shame that, and I kept saying, I said it at a speech the other night, why aren't we doing a better job? You know, voluntarism and authoritarianism, it's easy to make a choice. If you look at the results, you say, yeah, more peace and more prosperity? Yeah, I think I know an organization that promotes their whole cause to peace and prosperity. It's such a shame that we can't convince more people. And there must be a bit of lazy streak among a lot of people. And I think that they can get a free lunch. And right now, it's being recognized that more and more people know there's no free lunch out there, and they know something has to be done about it. And I hope we can contribute to taking care of that problem.
And the young people should pay attention in Europe, because the war is coming. You know, there's another article in Anti-War. We didn't have it as part of our show, but that the commander-in-chief of the armed forces in Ukraine said France is going to start sending instructors to Ukraine. And we all know how that starts, Dr. Paul. We know how the movie ends when you start spending instructors. It's next thing you know, you have a rifle in your hand. So the young people, it's a shame that this is what it might take to wake them up, but hopefully they will wake up when they see that they're about ready to get thrown into a trench, and it's not going to be a lot of fun. So,
what do you think NATO's getting wising up now? We had that little article about NATO allies skeptical about Stoltenberg for the NATO people getting $100 billion they're looking for. You know, the world's totally bankrupt. It's dependent on the dollar in many ways, and the dollar is shrinking in value, and we're in a place where the world currency is changing hands. And here NATO has to deal with this. So the big question to me, Daniel, are they going to get this money? And if they do, it's going to be printed money. And if they do that, won't that make our economy a lot worse?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we've talked about this a couple times, this plan to Trump-proof aid to Ukraine, whereas you got to put it in place where the U.S. can't back out and Trump can't decide to stop sending money. But you're right, there's an article in Politico that we saw today that talks about how they're starting to get some skittishness in Europe about this. It looks like it's going to be 100 billion euros, which is about $100 billion of a fund. And some of the countries are saying, you know what, we spent a lot of money already and we're losing. Do we really want to send another 100 billion? And I know that thankfully Hungary, a country that has a good leader who says they don't want to have war in Europe. Now he's been doing his best, Viktor Orban, to put the kibosh on sending more money. But you know, there's a danger signs out there too, Dr. Paul, because Robert Fico, who was the prime minister of Slovakia, he was on the same boat and he was almost assassinated. And in fact, and we didn't talk about this, but there was a European commissioner who called up the Georgians. The Georgians just passed a transparency bill, and they told the Georgian prime minister, listen, if you keep going against us, if you keep going against Europe, you better be careful, because remember what happened to Robert Fico. So there's a lot of unrest in Europe right now. I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that this war is lost. It's a sunk money pit, and the next they're going to take the blood and the lives of the young people. So I think they're starting to wake up, but it's a slow process.
Yes, and I predict that they will not have real value to do any of this. They'll proceed, and they think they will bring about a better world. But you know, to me, sometimes I'm surprised it lasts as long as it has. Most of the time people, you know, rebel against it. We're seeing that. It's sort of like talking about, well, why did our people and our governments and our teachers in the university tolerate the lockdowns over this, you know, dishonesty about COVID? and finally people did wake up. In some sense, a little bit sooner than other times, and yet they're still around there talking about the next go around. So it never ends. And I assume it's been going on for thousands of years to some degree, this whole issue of what's right and what is wrong. But it's, to me, so sad because the acceptance of doing something right is more acceptable whether you're in smaller groups. And throughout history, when the groups were smaller and they weren't quite so diverse, people just came together and they learned to get along within the group, and they learned to get along with the groups that were nearby, in more primitive times. But it's something that we see this, and they're going to continue to do this, and at the same time they're going to rely on, well, the Federal Reserve is still in business, aren't they? But we even see statistics now. They're measuring up. The Fed's assets are going down. Is the Fed going to go bankrupt? I get to thinking, Federal Reserves don't go bankrupt. They get destroyed when people get disgusted with the money because they have monopoly power to create it. And Treasury gets those bills from the Congress. What do they do with it? Nobody's going to be buying them. They buy them less than ever. China decided they don't want so many of our bills, so they go ahead and pass it on anyway. And then the Fed takes care of it. So it will be limited, and it ends is coming. It's related to war issues, and like I make fun of it because during the debate period that I was involved in, they said, well, one time we'll talk about economics, the other time we're going to talk about foreign policy, as if there's a big difference, especially when you have an empire running the world with a reserve currency, and under those conditions, you can't really separate it, because if you're going to destroy the money by fighting too many wars, the Romans knew about that. They inflated, and the Roman system, the Roman Empire, self-destructed. And we're in the process of destroying ourselves. Self-destruction is going on right now, and it's going to accelerate. So that's why, Daniel, we have a big job. We have to keep busy at what we're trying to do here.
All right, well, I'm going to close out, Dr. Paul, if you think we're ready. And one thing we didn't mention, which is we talked about last week, was this $300 million pier they built off the coast in Gaza. Well, they had a little storm, they had a couple waves, and guess what? The pier fell apart. So somebody got paid, somebody made money, but it wasn't the American people. So anyway, there's $300 million gone. Say goodbye to that. And my final thing I want to say, Dr. Paul, is that tickets are now on sale for the Ron Paul Institute Washington, D.C. conference. The title is The Liberty Platform. We're going to talk about, well, the Democrats have a platform, Republicans have a platform, a progressive platform, America First platform. Nobody's talking about the Liberty platform, and that's what we're going to talk about. I'll put something up on our website, ronpaulinstitute.org. But the best way, since I am out of town, the best way would be to go to ronpaulinstitute.org and subscribe to updates. I'm going to put out an update this afternoon with all the information about how to get a ticket and how to get an early bird ticket and save money and join us. So go to ronpaulinstitute.org, subscribe. This afternoon I will send out an update.
Back to the pier. The pier was built to be a humanitarian action. We provide all the bombs and incentives to destroy that whole area, but then we have to help on the humanitarian thing. We have some responsibility. So we're going to build this pier and unload there, and then a storm comes along and blows it apart, and we have this built in Gaza because we want to help the Palestinians, of course. Right now, we can't help the Christians anymore because more than half of them have been sent home, and they were sent out, just taken away from their home. So, but what did the wind do? They took the pier from the Palestinians and from from Gaza and dumped it on an Israeli beach. So I think there's a bit of irony there, but it's so ridiculous about what, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And, you know, prevention is much better in medicine than trying to find the cures. And right now, we always are talking about repairing and taking care of the mistakes that the government has created and the problems the Fed has created. And, you know, there's a lot of frustration out there. And there's one thing that I poked fun at during the talk the other day, and that had to do with, I talked about no labels parties. And it was one thing that I saw a write-up on it, and they mentioned that I wasn't attacking and doing much thing, but I even paraphrased it when I was talking about no labels party. I said, there's a lot of very sincere people, you know, that think that if we take the good part of the Republicans and the conservatives and the good part of the progressives and the Democrats and put them together, but it's the names. The names are destroyed because both sides have messed things up, and so we won't have names. We don't want to be identified as conservative or nationalistic or anything else like that. So they've called themselves No Label Party. Well, I got to thinking, well, they're identified now. They have a name, No Labels Party. So you can't get away with being identified. So the whole thing is, why I think it's so silly, is not that the good people didn't come together and try to start something and have a benefit from it. Is the thing of it is, most of the time, each side has to give up good parts of their their philosophy and say, oh, you want to cut the taxes here or here. Oh, okay, you cut there and we'll do this. And you know, they get together and they sacrifice maybe the pieces in order to bring people together. That doesn't work. They're going in the opposite direction of saying it's voluntarism, it's local, the individual should make decisions. Liberty is far superior to anything that is authoritarian, but I do not see how No Labels Party has a lot to offer in solving our problems. We're bankrupt, and maybe if they get together, it's part of the follow-up of bipartisanship. And if they have an argument, they all the bipartisan agreements, they increase the stuff, increase taxes and spending and support wars. So that attitude isn't going to solve our problem. I narrow it down. What we need is liberty, and that will lead us in the right direction. I want to thank everybody today for turning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.